horse drifted alarmingly in the betting was, Fensler in the morning continued to drift. He was late on the exchanges to lose. It was something you'd see in a Dick Francis novel, Charles Buttons.
The ground is soft. It's
heavy.
It's soft on times.
It's heavy.
Okay.
Hello and welcome. Yes, it's that time of week again. It is Sunday sermon time. And we thought again about mixing it up. And we've mixed it up yet again like a good house DJ. This week joining myself, John and Chris is none other than the PJA head honcho, Paul Struthers. Welcome, Paul Struthers, to the show.
Hi, Jeds.
Yeah, he's going to regret this in about 60 minutes.
He's filling in other job applications now.
I already am, yeah.
Updating his CV, everything.
Yeah. The BHA intern is absolutely tearing hair out right now.
Yeah, they're drafting that letter now, aren't they? Yeah. How disappointed they were that a senior member of the PJA, etc., etc. Yes.
Yeah. So before we come on to Paul and discussing useful topics, unlike our racing review, I'm going to start with our racing review, which of course includes the weekend action, which saw it's the Derby, it's the Oaks, and it's the Coronation Cup, together with a sort of unsavoury kind of gamble up at Hexham to go through before we come on to the real meaty stuff. Let's come on to the Epsom Oaks, which was on Friday. John, how disappointed were you with this year's Oaks?
I started to get disappointed with this year's Oaks on Musidora Day.
Yeah.
In all fairness. I mean, it's very formulaic now, isn't it? Aiden turns up, Aiden wins. There seems to be very little anybody can do about it. I shudder to think how many winners of this he's going to end up with, because there just seems to be very little in the way of opposition, doesn't there? I mean, he won all the trials. For the last 2 furlongs, he had it to himself anyway, really.
Is this showing a decline, though, possibly in the breeding stock?
It's showing 60 years' worth of absolute genius from John Magner.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That's what it's showing. There's nobody comes close. And that's the thing. And it was always going to get better and better and better because of the foundations that him and Vincent O'Brien laid down. Yeah. It's probably exceeded expectations to a certain degree. This is the fruition of the plan that was formulated out in 1975. You talking 50 years worth, aren't you?
But don't you think this has now been amplified, though? You look at our stock that's going through the sales ring, a lot of it is getting bought to be ran abroad.
Well, the funny thing is, you go back to when the lads were starting out on this long and arduous path. 1976, the Frogs won 4 of our 5 classics.
Yeah.
The situation was dangerous dire because everybody said, we haven't got anything decent in this country, UK racing is the shit. Frogs have all the good chemists. Piggott Road won for Akehurst in the Guineas, blah, blah, blah. And
yeah,
it gets amplified because it's an overseas yard dominating, If they didn't exist, or they were plying the trade in America exclusively, I don't think we'd feel any wiser just yet. Because we're not getting the amount of foreign raiders over here plundering our classics, apart from them.
Good for the game, Culmore?
It probably makes it less exciting for the layman, but overall, I think they've been exceptional for the game because they're just an exemplar outfit, aren't they? You just point at them. If you want to point anything out that's good about training or breeding, you just look at them. It's there for all to see, isn't it?
Do you think Wayne Lorden was most vigorous on Whirl? Will Ho actually commented on this. He said it had only 4 cracks of the Pro Cush.
The Pro Cush doesn't hurt, so it wouldn't have made any difference, would it?
No. Here we go. We've got the Jockeys van here.
I thought that Lorden's off, pretty much everything. I thought Ryan looked as though he had everything under control a furlong and a half out.
My observation, there was a huge track bias on Friday because there was not one race that was won by anything that come from further back than fourth on the Friday.
True enough.
There was a southwesterly wind, which is obviously more or less, it's like a three-quarter tailwind down the straight at Epsom. That kind of blows them home down the hill. It's quite breezy as well Friday, more breezy than Saturday. I would look at Friday's results as a whole for your trackers, etc. I would scratch any run from the back of the field. If you like a horse going forwards, ignore the back of the field on Friday. It's impossible to close, or seemingly so. Anyway.
Yeah, it was a big yes.
So on to the Coronation Cup. One of our bar stewards, staff members.
Have we got staff?
Yeah, we don't pay them. They're like interns or indefinite.
Yeah, there's no payment. It's just
passports.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You work now. You work hard. Yeah, that's what we yell at them, don't we? The overseer.
It's the bar steward's sweatshop. Yeah. But anyway, so one came out of the bar steward's sweatshop and said that, and this was before the race, so I'm giving kudos here.
Yeah.
Callan was a Ponce, and he said this before the race, didn't you, Chris?
I did, and on the basis that even broken clocks are right twice a year, I claim no real credit for it. I just looked one of those sort of secondy type horses, didn't it? Really, and I think to be fair, it was up against the wrong horse in Jan Bruegel, because that's not going to stop, was it? That's going to stay. So, and I think they ride it like that, chilly as they say, because I think they know it's got a resolution issue. So I think it has to be delivered bang on the line, because I think if it gets into a dogfight, doesn't really fancy it.
And Mr. Lang, to be fair, was accurate pre-race analysis on the podcast when he said that, do you really want to be backing Michael Barcelona held up out the back when Ryan's got his in position A and played out to perfection? And with the bias, though, Chris, I'm gonna denounce your comments as wrong.
Well, you're wrong. You're completely wrong, and I'm a judge, and fuck all. There you go.
I think the bias that day played into the hands of Jan Bruegel over Callan. I don't think on a normal track, conventional track, Jan Bruegel beat Callan ever again. But
I think it does. Put them back in the cans. Run them again. As you say at a dog race. Put them back in the cans. Yeah.
John, is that your assessment, or do you think Callan is indeed a Ponce?
No, I don't think he's a Ponce, but I do think Jan Bruegel is borderline Giant's Causeway type.
Very tough. Material. Very tough. I'm not going to take credit away from him now. He was very, very tough.
In the old days, he's one of them that you could have given 14 with Pro Cushion last Strurlong. And he'd have responded to every one of them.
Yeah.
He'd actually lose out for these whip rolls. Yeah. Because when you could really get stuck in and give him a proper few digs, he would respond. And it would be a shame if he gets done in a big race about a neck or something when a good hammering at the sailing home.
We'll come on to this in a bit. Like the watering situation we've got at the moment, a weakening of the breed yet again. Obviously, we can't have horses that don't respond. Lazy horses, there's no room for them now these days. This is one of the problems, obviously, when you introduce the number of strikes admitted to a horse. It can only go one way, and that's the sort of issue with the Pro Cushion. Which was, by the way, back in the day, if you remember, Nick Rust sort of demonstrated that at York himself. When he was BHA chair, he turned up at York races, he started whacking himself. Maybe
Please, sir, may I have another? Yeah. Animal House, isn't it? The old induction.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a strapline for this show. Nick Rust turned up at York to whack himself.
He did. He started hitting himself on the demonstrating.
Yeah. Like a bag girl, yeah.
One more for luck.
It hurts so good.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
We're only 10
Paul
minutes.
Struthers is signed off now. Look, he's left the chat.
He's gone. He's gone. Yeah, he's had enough of this. So we come on to Derby Day. That's enough in it. Coronation Cup, Oaks, Derby, and we're going to Hexham in a minute to talk about that gamble.
That'll be nice.
Yeah, but before that, the Derby, everyone's saying now that you need a good Royal Ascot to save the flat, because the Derby, again, the one sat first and second finished first and second.
It was a horrible, so what kind of Derby, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Really, I mean, I've never known so many fancy horses run stinkers, I don't think.
I loved it. I
Well,
backed the winner. I loved it. It's fucking best
No,
derby I've seen in a
well,
decade.
yeah, you
honestly.
would.
Cheer off the
Yeah,
sofa,
yeah.
get in, easy game, etc.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just say I actually backed the winner as a
There
bit
you
of
go.
cover from the anti-Paul.
Yeah.
And I also...
Bloody hell, Chris Pull.
yeah, well,
yeah, bugling up. No,
here's
but
one
you're
that I
right.
would
It's a cover
call
bet. It's a cover bet.
This is a reverse Chris Pole as well, though, because
Yeah.
in addition to that, I had a £30 each way treble.
Yeah.
Lambourne at 10-1.
Oh,
Yep.
go on.
The James Ortnose at Lingfield in the finale. And Regalian at Edinburgh for the shirt,
Oh dear.
where Kieran Fallon was outridden by 86-year-old Joseph Fannin and beaten a nose.
That's horrific.
Well, this is it.
3.5 G's that would have made.
Experience there in the saddle has done you. But anyway, back to the derby. After these trumpets and reverse trumpets, the tail of the tape was Lambourne managed to dominate the race, as was sort of a Friday scenario, and he kept even fractions. There was nothing spectacular about anything that he did during the race, other than that he just kept on at a high cruising speed in sort of reference point fashion, John.
Yeah, but you sort of got the impression that the field behind were about an average of £20 worse than the field at reference point, mate, because they just looked terrible, didn't they? I mean,
I would be very worried for the 3-year-olds turning up in the King George taking on the elders. If they do.
They seem a bad bunch, don't they? I mean, it was really difficult to pick out anything that gave any hope going forward.
Yep, and we were badly wrong on Pride of Arras, but then he pulled his chance away. He didn't seem to act on the track, tailed off.
The thing that struck me about that one, he seemed to be struggling to handle it going uphill, not just down. Which, everybody's got an uphill gallop, for Christ's sake, haven't they?
Yeah, it's a hard race to read, but the third and fourth come out with a bit of credit. If you're looking for sort of something to take out of the race, the third and fourth, Tennessee stud, Joseph O'Brien's, the baby Joseph, made some nice late ground, doing some good work late on. New ground as well, the French horse. But again, it puts the race in context. That come from nearly 17th position, I believe, and then made all that late ground. But French horses are trained differently anyway. They've usually got more gears, and you've got to put that form in context when it was beaten by Cauliflower that finished second to Camille Pizarro in the French Derby.
I felt Stanhope Yarden showed a bit for the future when getting into the race and then maybe not quite seeing it out. You'd have maybe said that was a Hampton Court type performance.
It is a bad 3-year-old year, and this is something we'll come on to some of your points. Now, thank you for your questions. Dave Richardson's been on. Was the Derby shit? I think so. Are there any trainers who can train middle distance animals other than Aidan O'Brien? Yes, plenty, but they actually need the stock. Like John rightly pointed out, Aidan O'Brien this has been a project from Magnier over the years, which is why they've trained so many Derby winners. How that changes, I don't know. I don't see how it can. Luke Tucker's been on, and he says no advertisement for the Derby. Media-wise, barely no coverage whatsoever, and probably hard to given the ticket prices. Should we write off the Dante form, maybe? I think we'd have to at this stage. Nothing got in the first 10. So I agree with that. Graham Thomas agrees. RE, the current Copper 3-year-olds, looks the worst on record. Harsh on Field of Gold, he looks a class act. I'll be honest, that's the one horse I'm taking out of this year. He does have a serious turn of foot. In general, I sort of agree with that. They do look a very, very poor bunch. Right, moving on from the Derby. So me and John don't rate it in terms of form going forwards for now. Going on to Hexham. Gamble from a certain Mr. Noel Kelly. Expertly put by Chris Poole on Twitter today when he said, has Noel Kelly had any kitchens fitted of late? A very good comment. I've read some stuff on this. I watched the race. It was quite workman-like in the when it landed a gamble that you wouldn't think it from the Racing Post, John. They had it open up at 2-1 and touching 6-4. However, if you read the on-course market, Mike Eckley laid 11-1, 9-1 and 6-1 on the course. So how that's opened up at 2-1, again, is this favouring Big Corp again? There's
a lot of shady stuff getting reported regarding starting prices and show prices and all sorts of things, aren't there? I mean, the days of Neil Wilkins seem a dim and distant memory, I'm afraid. There's just a lot of shite going in the books now, isn't there? If it's not going forecasts, it's prices. You can't really believe anything you read anymore.
It's incredibly poor. I think the media are half to blame because again, it's the media sort of shield all this goings on. It's only when there's a big hoo-ha on Twitter or a big they actually report anything that's or decide to touch on something. But anything that's sort of like this, they just turn a blind eye to. There was no way that Mr. McGill was falling off at the last like Philip Burns the other week, despite making an absolute howler of the last. Mr. McGill's cash. Is this acceptable in terms of racing sort of integrity, or like is this just a gamble?
I don't know what we've got in place for it, like, to be honest. I mean, there doesn't seem to be an alternative, does there, other than merrily dancing down the lane hand in hand with Big Carp. This is where gross profits tax has brought us.
This is why we need more.
By the nose in every aspect of the sport.
Yeah, we need more of the same and more wagons to produce a sort of conveyor belt line of wagons to sort of fund the sport, if you like. Winners not welcome, so to speak. Moving on from the racing review, I mean, whatever we think happened at Epsom, it is what it is. It's always going to happen. It's racing, for God's sake. Chris, you love a gamble, don't you?
I do, but only if I'm party to them before they happen. It's disgusting. The optics are terrible, absolutely dreadful. But if you told me, have a few quid on this, then I think keep your fucking mouth shut. Yeah, and crow about it afterwards. That's the way.
Indeed, like you've done on the Derby winner.
Oh yeah, I didn't spark off. Honestly,
awful.
Yeah.
Your man told him.
Yeah,
you're a man.
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to come on to Epsom this week and the sort of costings, and I'm going to bring Paul Struthers into this debate. Paul, first of all, the pricing at Epsom this week, I don't know how it's different from years before because I haven't been sort of privy to past years, but we were talking £85 pay on the gate to get into the grandstand. They were charging £50 for under 17s, which I just find absolutely repulsive, if I'm honest. These are the future fans of the sport, surely. And so a family of four to the Derby Day, you've got to be among the hierarchy to afford to be able to go, I would think, in order to have a good day out. Obviously, the middle's free, but the middle's dying off. Paul Struthers, what is the answer?
I wouldn't be doing this job if I knew the answers to questions like that. Look, I think first things first, it's elite sport across the piece is getting increasingly expensive, isn't it? Attending any sporting event is not cheap, albeit, my boy Harry, he supports Southampton for his sins. You can go there at numerous games throughout the year, as long as you don't want to go see the big teams this year. We could easily go, and between the two of us, I was maybe paying £35 for a ticket, and it'd be a tenner for Harry. So, 45 quid for a Premier League match is pretty good value in my view.
Oh, yes.
I know the race courses, obviously, they benchmark, as they say, against other sporting events. Derby's an elite event, but it is a lot. And I think because one of the selling points of racing is the fact that kids go free. It's always been a major selling point, albeit there have always been some specific fixtures that's not applied to. I think Cheltenham Festival might be one of them, where kids don't get in for free and you have to pay full price. But it's an expensive day. I remember moving to London in 2001. And we used to go religiously, and we'd go, me and a bunch of mates, and we'd go and we'd sit in the middle, and it was fantastic. But I haven't been in the middle for donkey's years, and to be honest, I didn't go to Epsom yesterday. It was our village cricket six-a-side day, so I was doing that. But it's expensive, and I don't think there is a simple answer, because if you were the Jockey Club, you'd probably say, well, if we knocked 10 quid off the ticket or 15 quid off the ticket, would it have really moved the needle on attendances? Probably not. I don't know. I don't know what. I know it's stuck in the question a little bit. I just don't know what the answer is, because unless you are going to reduce the price all the way down to 10 or 20 quid, I don't think it's really, knocking £5-10 off. I don't think it's going to really make a huge difference, is it?
It's a fair point, catching on what you said there. Why have you stopped going then? Are you just fed up of it, or what is it?
Well, it's not that it's not a specific stopped going to Epsom at all. I some of Epsom's meetings used to be. I used to love that April midweek meeting with the
Oh,
City
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
Suburban and the Great Metropolitan Handicap, although they're a bit
Yes.
of a kind of shadow of their former selves, those two races, even since I've been involved in racing since kind of like the late 90s, early 2000s. I'll be honest, I don't go racing much on a Saturday simply because my kids play sport. So you're basically a human taxi service now with my kids being 13 and nearly 16.
Yep.
So kids play sport. I play cricket as well with my son. Harry's 13, and his club that he plays kids cricket for have just set up a B team for the league, so that the youngsters who state school kids just don't play cricket anymore. It's not like when I was growing up and we had a groundsman and everything else at our state school and we played loads of cricket. His school, even though it's got 1,500 kids, doesn't do cricket. So the coach there has set up a B team for them to play league cricket. So I play that. He plays football in winter. I referee football as well, for kind of idiotic thing to do. It's not like
God, you must love getting slagged off. Like, you must absolutely adore it.
you just get used to it. So why not do it as well as for your job in your spare time as well? I must have. I'm just weird. So see, look, it's not I don't go to Epsom or anywhere else because I don't like racing anymore and I'm fed up. It's just weekends is other sport, and yeah, that's why we don't go. And the kids, when we used to take the kids, by the way, they loved going racing, and they just at the moment they're at an age where they're not into it.
That's nailed it, Paul, hasn't it? You know, that the Derby no longer occupies the position of prominence that it once enjoyed in the warp and weft of British society. It used to be a thing, didn't it? You used to have the middle all packed out, and the Derby was an annual day out for huge groups of people. But now racing is competing, for the leisure pound with innumerable other kind of sports and interests. So I you're right, there isn't an answer, and I think it's a wider problem in society. I think you can throw as much money as you can at marketing. Yes, you can probably get the attendances up, but I think the glory days are gone. It's a bit like dog racing, isn't it? People used to say after the war, White City and Wembley used to be packed out and blah, blah, blah. But that was because there wasn't as much to do. And that's the thing. Racing's competing with tons of different things, thousands of different pursuits of a weekend, and racing's just one of a number of sports, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's changed a lot. Like going back again to when I was in London, we used to do the double header. So you'd go down to Epsom and then you'd be back up and you'd be going to Wimbledon, because I lived in Earlsfield. So it's like a big stone's throw from the ground. We used to do it. I'm pretty sure it was both on the same day, wasn't it? Or it was at least. It was.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
I did that a couple of years, but you're right. You used to get punters coming from Epsom, heavily refreshed, either, trying to get it back or to play it up. And Wimbledon used to be banged out of a Saturday night, or, it just used to be a thing, but it's just not, it doesn't capture the public imagination now. And a new generation of people haven't grown up with that thing of, going to the betting shop or putting bets on for their parents, and used to be sitting around it doesn't exist anymore. So I think it's a cultural shift. I think that racing's got a real problem to try and ignite people's interest, whereas before I didn't think you had to try very hard, because it's the Derby. Everyone goes to the Derby or has a view on it. Now it's like meh. I mean, I spoke to a guy on Thursday who was about 10 years younger than me, and I said, Derby Saturday, and he actually turned around and said, what's the Derby? So that horse race, right, yeah, kind of had no concept of it, no experience of it, no understanding of it, other than the fact he remembers vaguely reading about a horse race called the Derby, and he's only 10, 12 years younger than me, so it's quite worrying, really.
There's the other element at the moment. I mean, just people are skint, aren't they? I mean,
Amen.
It's a really, really challenging economic environment for so many people. When you're having to then prioritise what you spend your money on. And I think it's a really, I could talk about this for ages, because I'm not a marketeer and therefore I don't have the answers. I know, getting someone, Jim Allen's now there at Epsom, and Jim is, he's a bit of a force of nature, Jim, and I'm sure he's only just started, and I'm sure he'll he'll be looking to do all sorts, and they've obviously got a new chief executive at Jim Mullen. So I think it's going to be interesting, but just I think we can, and I understand it, and I do it. We can beat ourselves up a lot, and sometimes with justification. But it's things like so. If I look at kind of my friends, none of them are massively into racing. They'll go if we arrange a day and they'll go. But it's interesting. Just some of the kids who are like 17, 18, 19, 20 are getting into it. They are. And unsurprisingly, they're getting into it through betting, and then Invades, which is the company that takes students. They're getting loads of, and I know it's not just for the racing, but if you speak to the guy Dom, and saying, well, they do like the racing, but you've got to put a bit more on for them than just the racing. But I know, for example, he always insists, because they're often in the middle, aren't they, or in a kind of out the way, so they can have their party without disturbing other race goers too much. But I know he always insists that wherever they are on the course, because did they do a day at York as well where they were in the middle? Yeah.
Yes,
He always insists that wherever the race course put them, even if it's in the middle, that everyone who's got a ticket can come over and can get to the parade ring and everything. So it's not just let's get them all here on the race course and get them smashed. He is trying. He's genuinely trying. So look, I think times have changed. Derby's not what it was even 25, 24 years ago when I first started going to it. I just think society's changed, doesn't it?
Do you know what, Paul? I totally agree with that. And obviously, I'm an old stickler. I love what it was, and sadly, I'm sorry to say to all our grey-haired pound listeners, it ain't coming back no matter what we do. But there was one suggestion I had to maybe bolster the Derby card on the Saturday. In other words, scrap the Friday off to a degree, like by swapping the 3-year-old Dash and the mile and 4 handicap for the Coronation Cup and the Oaks to be put on Saturday. So you have 3 Group 1s and 2 Group 3s, and it becomes probably an immense card. And I think that way, racing's got a lot of fans, obviously, like fans that are instilled in the game, like myself, like a lot of our listeners, that are literally racing fanatics. There's nothing finer than seeing a Coronation Cup, Oaks, and Derby on the same day. What a card that would be. Is that something that you'd sort of support?
I think it'd make a bloody good card, wouldn't it? On all those races on one day. But equally, I do understand why they would want them spread across the 2 days. And if you had a particularly, which we do get from time to time, like horrible weather day, and then you've got your 3 Group 1s all on the same day with the ground progressively getting worse, what order do you put those races in? Because Andrew always leaves that fresh strip of ground on the inside, doesn't he, between the Friday and the Saturday? So I imagine that might be something they'd be potentially concerned about. But okay, it'd be a great day. But again, it's that would doing that it make it a stronger card on the Saturday? Would it move the needle from a race goer volume perspective? Would it reduce the Friday crowd? And it's no, there's no doubt it did. Yeah, my instinct is I don't think it would, as much as I'd go, that is a fantastic.
Correct. For people like you and us and others who are similarly invested in the sport, we'd go, yeah, that's an amazing car. But for newish people or people that don't have that sort of, in quotes, pedigree of in the sport, it'll be so, yeah, great. What does the Oaks mean? What's the Coronation Cup? It doesn't have any resonance.
If you just call Friday Ladies' Day, it wouldn't make any difference.
Call it Bonnie Blue Day. She'd get a few punters down there. Get Bonnie Blue down there. They'd be queuing out the fucking door, wouldn't they?
But this is what I think's quite sad of society, really, because supposedly the premier classic of the entire planet. It's all about winning the Derby. The Derby has got the longest tradition. It's got the best history, right? It's all about winning a Derby. We've lost that.
Racing's broken its link with the working classes, early over the years. 40 years ago, when we had heavy industry, we had a huge manufacturing base, the talk in factories and workshops for weeks leading up to the Derby was the Derby.
Yeah, Sharabang
And
down to the course. Yeah, days out, a lot.
families with nothing much to do with racing the rest of the year, and it dominated. But slowly but surely, racing has been taken away from the working classes. And I'll give you an example. The opening titles of the ITV racing now. Can anybody tell me what would possibly appeal out of those opening titles to somebody that's worked in every industry all their lives? It's a load of white people in top hat and tails turning up at the fucking theatre. And then there's a string quartet playing or whatever, classical music.
You're right.
Where the fuck is the appeal there? There's not one ethnic face in the crowd. Not one. Where the hell is the appeal for anybody outside the top 5% there? It's absolutely scandalous that is a supposed selling point that, the opening show, the morning line, whatever they call it. And it's the same with the titles on the afternoon. Anybody just casually channel surfing, they come across that, then it starts, you've got the Kamanis talking about little ordinary people, like the lady that read Pride of a Sad, little ordinary people, just ordinary, with farm their own broodmares, just somebody little reading stuff. It doesn't, they're taking it away from the people that loved it.
I can't argue with any of that, really. Some listener comments before we give Paul a grilling. Michael Carson's been on Course Bookmaker. Why did the powers that be at the JCR think finds a successful Derby day? The quality of the card is average at best. The crowds are pitiful. Which bit do they think went well? All fair points well made, but I think we've sort of covered it all, really. I think it's a combination of things, isn't it? Like we said, it's the demographic of people nowadays that are able to afford to go, the appetite for racing as a sport when there's kids like football and cricket and golf and everything else now, and things to compete with, and maybe back in the day, maybe less to compete with. It was harder for a youngster, say back in the 80s, from a poor council estate to take up cricket or golf, obviously for the expense of buying the clubs and the equipment. So maybe like times have changed in that aspect. Same as obviously you've had the animal rights people and things like that get into youngsters' heads about that it's a terrible, terrible sport to get involved with. Very cruel, which is very inaccurate. Some of it has mileage, but as a whole, it's inaccurate. Woody's been on £85 to get into Epsom, £37 to get into Worcester. That's for their flood insurance fund.
Yeah, gondola racing, that is. Yeah, exactly.
Where will racing get it that it's just too much? Hopefully Nottingham's £9 days demonstrate people turn up when it's value for money. I agree, Woody. I went to the Arc to watch Generous, and it cost me £5 and a race card to get in. And that was the Arc meeting. The French don't turn up for that either. It was all the British and the books, and
But let's be fair, you don't want the French to turn up there.
Bill Carson, Rafe Ralph's stable form is beginning to resemble last year's Clarehaven. As for the Derby, it's just become another crap Saturday meeting, lost among shit summer jump meets. A question for all you three then. So why wasn't the Derby meeting marketed? I was surprised to see it get so little coverage on even racing channels. Cheltenham, they go on about it since October to March, and all these roads to this, roads to that, preview nights, this, that, and the other. Why on earth have we got our supposedly the greatest classic to win on the planet being resorted to no marketing?
I think it's easier in their defence to chart the horse's progress to the Cheltenham Festival from sort of November time because ultimately there are more known quantities than on the flat. Because frankly, you've no idea what Aidan O'Brien's guineas, fillies, or his Derby horses are, do you really? He's got so many to choose from. You wouldn't.
A weekly half-hour show, though, Chris. You could certainly have a look at replays of the maidens and that from the start of the season.
Yeah, I guess you could. But half of them wouldn't turn up, would they? They wouldn't appear. At least with the Cheltenham Festival, you're going to get runners, aren't you?
If the job was done right, you maybe could sift a little.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe you could. Yeah, maybe.
Paul, do you think it could be though that the flat racing sort of is shooting itself in the foot in the terms that national hunt racing, the heroes return the year after, and people get attached to horses, etc., in terms of the high standards they achieve, the brilliance of the jumping, and the return next year to the same festival. People relate to these animals and magnificent beasts, whereas like in flat racing, as 3-year-olds, if they're any good, it's off to the sheds.
Yeah, that's been spoken about for as long as I've been in the sport, and it's why you get horses. I'm going back a bit now and showing my age. Whether it's your double triggers and your Persian punches, or those real high quality stayers on the flat that are the ones, other than your kind of really elite, kind of almost once in a lifetime horses like Frankel, but those stayers, because they're the ones that are coming back for a good few years, rather than race until 3, maybe until 4 if you're lucky, and then they're retired to the breeding shed. And that's always been thus, isn't it? Because jumps horses are geldings, and therefore they're racing, whereas flat horses going off to the breeding shed. But I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I don't know. The Derby would have been marketed. And look, I think I saw the pictures, obviously, on the Racing Post of the hill, and it looked deserted. But then you looked at the forecast. Forecast was absolutely shocking. And even if I went back to when I was first in London in 2001, and with a forecast like that, probably wouldn't have gone to the hill, because you were looking at the forecast going, well, we're going to go down and we're going to get absolutely soaked all afternoon. So that would have had an impact on that side of things, and it always does. The weather for those last minute, what do they call them, War Cups, who are coming, that would have had an impact as well as, I'm sure, the price of it.
What's the feeling, Paul, amongst your members of this new practice of introducing the jockeys before big races? Because to me, it looks very awkward and forced.
I think that's true. They're not. I can't say they're all thrilled about it, and it's
Ryan Moore.
But they're going along with a lot of these initiatives, because look, if people are trying, Jim, trying to bring some razzmatazz, and I guess it's like all this stuff. So I'm a big fan of American sports, and particularly NFL, and I love the way America broadcasts sports. And when you watch, they don't have many nationally televised racing fixtures in the States, which is why when they do, I just love the way American sports broadcast, and it is more.
It kicks lumps out of our coverage, doesn't it?
It's just different, and I think there's always going to be an element where as British and Irish people, we're not as just naturally flamboyant, are we, as those across the pond and stuff.
Would you not say, though, with American coverage of racing, Paul, they are actually addressing people who follow the sport and bet on the sport, rather than people who might be channel hopping and might look in for 2 minutes?
No, certainly when I watch it, so Breeders' Cup, and if you're watching is it NBC or whoever broadcasts it? Yeah, it's betting's at the heart of it. There is an element where over there broadcast is easier because of the layout of all the tracks. So you've just got ovals that are pancake flat. They're all on private land, aren't they? So they're all in a secure area. So it makes. So I know, for example, with Jockey Cam, where Jockey Cam's just frustrating for the guys that run it, and I find it a little bit frustrating that it's not taken off more over here. But I know over there, so if Jockey Cam are at Gulfstream Park, they can set all the tech up at the start of their kind of season, which lasts for probably a couple of months. All the tech goes up and it stays up, so there's not constant setup costs of doing it, and you've not got to deal with like how many of our race courses are on public land, and therefore they're not fully secure sites and all that. So look, I must admit, the way American racing coverage is for those big days really does float my boat. I love it. It's the same even with how Sky do football and rugby and cricket and everything else. It's all very different over here to how they broadcast their sports. And as much as I love what they do, it's just different.
Do you think the BHA are wrong for sort of rocking along with this general theme that terrestrial television has developed over the last 20 years of trying to appeal to people who don't like racing. Do you think the BHA should maybe say something and say, look, we need to get a bit more betting focus and a bit more in tune with people who are actually there for the racing?
I'm just not sure how much of say that the BHA have in it, to be honest, because the relationship, I guess, if you looked at it that way, is between the broadcaster and the rights holder. It's not with the broadcaster and the BHA.
I would have thought ITV must look to the BHA for some sort of tacit approval, though, surely.
I mean, look, it's going back a long time, but certainly when I was in the comms team there at the BHA, there was a relationship that you had with the broadcasters, but they weren't approaching you for any guidance or seal of approval. The only time they were coming for a seal of approval was for things they needed approval for, whether that be going in the changing room or the stables or whatever.
Like, what I don't get really is from more or less the days when Claire Balding and Carson took over from Wislon on the BBC, and then she went and did the managed decline of Channel 4 racing as well. The overall trend has been for less people watching racing. And why the people responsible for terrestrial television can't look at that and say, well, what we're doing isn't actually working because less and less people are watching.
Is that?
Yeah, albeit that is not a straight. It's not because of the way the world has changed and because of the way we all watch programs. It's not just you sit in front of the TV, turn it on because that's how you're going to watch it. Like, and I'm sure if you're watching a race. So if I'm out and about, which I normally am on a weekend, and I'm watching racing, I'm watching it on my phone. I'm either watching it through Sky Go, or I'm watching it because I placed a bet, and therefore I'm watching it streamed on the betting app. So I think that they would say that the comparison between viewing figures is between now and say 20 years ago is a really hard, if not impossible, thing to do.
Yeah,
but I don't watch ITV racing, but I don't watch it because I'm making a point or I don't like it. It's just I'm not at home, so you're out and about and you're watching it.
I fully appreciate that point, Paul, but I wouldn't mind betting that if the figures were going up, they wouldn't mention any of the other stuff. They'd be saying, oh, how are we doing well?
I'll take that point.
The questions now for you, Paul, in terms of like what you do and in charge of the PJA. We've had questions from listeners, which I will go through first. Steve Tilley's been on. Does he feel jockeys are better judges of going than clerks of the course?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I get and I like so a track can walk very differently to it rides. I wouldn't necessarily go, yes, they are, but I think being a clerk is not an easy job by any stretch of the imagination, and we know that clerks at the big meetings, for example, you'll be having connections onto them not wanting watering, you'll be having connections onto them wanting watering and certain going. I think the stuff around the going stick that's come out over the last month ago.
Who instigated that, Paul? Who instigated that disgrace?
Exactly. Yeah. I find that I found that really bad. I found it really bad because as much as I know through and Dale deals with this side of things at the PJA, but I know for years the clerks and the race courses haven't liked the going stick, and I know the going stick responds differently to different soil types and etc., and it is not perfect. But it was always the case that you're not looking at how you compare a going stick reading at Epsom with a going stick reading at Pontefract. You're looking as a punter at being able to compare a going stick at Pontefract on this day versus what the ground has been when that going stick reading has approximately been there at that course before. And if they're buggering about with going stick readings, then I think that's really bad because it's really bad for the customer. It's really bad from a betting point of view. So I wouldn't say and I know it's a tongue-in-cheek question, I wouldn't say jockeys are better. It's just a different thing to ride a course as it is to walk it. And the one thing that would drive jockeys up the wall is when they're coming in and saying, you've given the going description as X and we're riding it and it is definitely Y, and that the going doesn't change. And that does happen. And I know that frustrates jockeys in the same way it frustrates punters and trainers and owners.
Sure, I have lots of data on this. James Sanderson is probably one of the most accurate clerks going in terms of time-based ground. If he says it's good to firm, he's in the higher rank. I've got all the data. There are the clerks that use the going stick and it rides softer than what the going stick describes, or faster. And James Sanderson said he's 15 years of experience at doing it, walking it every day, and this time and the other with his dog, says that provides a better reading than the stick. Now,
yeah, and I think that is entirely valid. The clerk's experience of their track, of their soil, of their unique features of whatever course it is hugely valuable and hugely important. But I think it is also really important to have something that's not just an opinion, albeit a very educated one, and we've got a lot of very, very good clerks. But I think having that alternative measure, and use it if you want, and that's, it's just something else that's there as a piece of information that punters can choose to use and take into account for their betting or not.
The other thing is, for example, good to firm at Ascot back in the day was 10s and 11s. And now we've moved to the safe word, haven't we? The safe word in society, where, oh, no, that's Bath. We need 7.9, 7.8 for good to firm at Ascot. Aren't we in that era now where we've kind of pushed ourselves into forcing clerks such as James Sanderson? He said even like he's had ground in the 10s. Now, if he says, right, I've had ground in the 10s, but if I put 10 point something, the trainers aren't going to run. But I know it's still good to firm. It's fine. Good covering of grass. It's fine. What would you say to that?
I think, again, it's a really, really valid point. And I think it's a thankless job being a clerk. And that's one of the, and I kind of touched on it earlier, that's one of the reasons. Because but I don't think, what will wind trainers up and owners up and jockeys up more, I think it does happen on occasion. I don't think it's particularly commonplace, is when a going description is given because the clerk is trying to address that issue, and it is a valid issue, and then they arrive and they feel that the going description isn't accurate or has been intentionally or not misleading.
I know what you're saying. Yeah, honestly, as a full-time punter, I would trust James Sanderson's going reports over any stick reading. That's me personally, but I do understand your point of view. The stick is the barometer. That's where we've moved to. We've moved to figures and data and stuff like that. But I do believe, like the July course, for example, that John hates, has produced stick readings of good to firm in places, and it's rode 4 seconds slower than standard. And that's why John himself doesn't even bother hardly punting on the July course, because he says himself, am I right, John, that you just can't have it as a...
Well, it's just dead for punting, really. I mean, there's no racing line, there's nothing, it's just been trashed.
Good one here from Paul Fitzgerald. He says, are jockeys ever getting their saunas back? Is any progress being made in this area? Seems almost inhumane what they have to put themselves through at times to shed excess pounds under the present setup.
We've not given up on it. It's not going to be easy, and the reason it's not going to be easy is because there are very few courses now that even have them in. A lot have been removed. There's maybe 11 or so that still have saunas that just aren't in use at the moment. The BHA's position is that before they can return, they have to establish that they are safe. That's where we are. So there's a research project.
The safe watchword, safe grounds, safe betting, safe saunas.
So there are 2 research projects that the BHA are funding, one of which has started, which is a sweat study. So basically, there's not huge amounts of research on saunas. So there was a study done by Liverpool John Moores a reasonable amount of time ago. I think it was about 10 years ago, where they had jockeys dehydrating, but they were doing it via running on an incline treadmill. There's never been any research, and then they put them on an equisizer and saw if there was any difference in performance or balance. Now, there was no statistically significant difference in anything other than there was a slight difference in reduction in pushing strength after they dehydrated on the treadmill. So they're rerunning that study, or changed it, and they are now doing the second bit, so still getting them on an equisizer afterwards and doing other tests, but instead of running and dehydrating, they're dehydrating in a sauna. So they've had 2 testing days so far. They're going to be running a load more across the summer. So we've got to let that research project has to run its course. Then there's a separate mental health study that is being done, and as part of that study, one of the researchers in that is Katie O'Farrell, former rider who's qualified and got her degree and done her master's now. So it might be as part of her PhD, she's doing that. And one of the things that study will look at is specifically looking at the change to weight making habits since the saunas have gone. And I think there's an our view, and I think it's a pretty common sense one that will stand up, is that what we are asking jockeys to do now is be dehydrated for a significantly longer period than they previously had to be. We've not given up on it. Can I see them coming? I can't see, if I'm being honest, it coming back as it was before, where race courses absolutely had to have them. It was a requirement of being licensed that you had one. But I could certainly see, depending on how this research goes, I could certainly see courses being able to have them and some courses having them. But we are probably, crikey, this research has to conclude and then it has to be peer reviewed and published. So it's certainly not happening this year, and I would imagine if it is happening, it's going to be much more kind of second half of next year. But we've not given up, far from it.
Let's not forget, though, we're in an era where you're having to fight tooth and nail to get exercise bikes moved away from open drains that stinking piss, aren't you? So we're a long way off the luxury of saunas.
Are you aware of the racecourse improvements? I've seen the Doncaster new facilities for jockeys. It looks quite impressive.
Yeah.
Are you aware of any other courses that maybe are doing really well on this, or maybe name a course that maybe should be doing more for balance purposes?
Yeah, so look, we know there's a load that have now been done. Leicester, Brighton, Fakenham, Taunton, Warwick, Newmarket, July course. Pontefract, who I think were the first. Norman did a fantastic job there. Ripon, Beverley, Newton Abbot, Worcester, Southall, Stratford, Hamilton, Musselburgh, Goodwood, Doncaster, Newbury now, and York. And they've all done, to varying degrees, a really good job. And by that varying degrees, it's not every track's the same. So, if you're going to York or if you're going to Ascot, they're your elite tracks. That's your premier tracks, and you're not therefore expecting the same. Chester's facilities as well, which are fantastic, albeit they don't meet the current kind of standards, but they're a new modern facility just like York's is. You don't expect the same standards. You don't expect York or Chester at Fakenham, for example, but the bad ones are the ones that you've seen. So Redcar is awful, always has been, and it's even worse for the girls at Redcar. There are other tracks where the facilities aren't great, at all, or are really poor. Quite a few small jumps tracks in the north that aren't great. Newcastle, and it's places like Newcastle. So Newcastle's interesting. So Newcastle is tricky for ARC insofar as it's a listed building, which then comes with numerous planning issues. The jockeys are racing at Newcastle a lot. And so somewhere like Newcastle, which I think isn't due to be done until 2027. So jockeys are staring down the barrel at going to a load of pretty average evening meetings throughout the winter in really not very good facilities. Again, it's something we've not fully given up on because obviously the BHA announced a couple of weeks back it was all going to be done by the end of 2027. We weren't hugely impressed because all that's really done is bring forward courses that were otherwise going to go to 2030. But we know from, say, speaking to Jockey Club, that those that were going to take until 2030 on one timeline were being brought forward in any event. And I think ultimately my suspicion is what's happened is just a load of race courses just for 3 years, because it was announced in November 2021 to be completed in October 2024. I think if we're being honest, it was always probably, in hindsight, too challenging a timescale. But I just think a load of courses were like, yeah, didn't even think about it. And then you get to the end of the 3 years and they're effectively back at the start of the process. And during that period of time where no one's done anything, the cost of materials has gone up and through the roof, and construction and everything relating to building has gone through the roof. You've had the impact of affordability checks. But despite all that, and I think if it had been dealt with differently, and if race courses or the RCA would have come and said, look, we're not going to make this deadline, we're really struggling, but we'll get it done by the end of 2025, I think we'd have gone, yeah, no, we understand. It's not ideal, but we get it. But they haven't. And I just think it's, our focus now is on drawing attention to where the facilities are really poor, because the jockeys have had enough. And that's why you saw the red car stuff, because Tom Marquand's just gone, right, I'm not having this, and I'll put it up on social media. And working with courses who are working with us and willing to kind of get the ball rolling. But yeah, the reality is, the way it is now, you're going to be some tracks 2027. So we need to think, and I think the jockeys will have to consider what we do. Do we just roll over and go, fine, we can't do any more? And I know that's not where we are as the PJA, and it's not where our board is. We had a board meeting last week, and they're still rightly kind of putting the pressure on me and Dale and Adam and the team at the PJA. So we'll look at what else. And we said in our statement, we'll consider next steps, and that's exactly what we're considering. And it might be, I think one of the things that we absolutely will look to do, I know the ROA do it from an owner's perspective. I know the National Association of Racing Staff do it from their perspective, is let's start doing a kind of accreditation / scoring system for racecourses and facilities for jockeys. If we can get that done, I know they do it in American football. I just touched on that. I'm really into it. I know the NFL Players Association do the same with teams and their facilities and what they provide the players and the standard of various things. So I think that's definitely a project that we're looking to get off the ground in the next couple of months, because that might bring a bit of focus to certain race courses that are unfortunately lagging miles behind.
Good stuff. You are head of the PJ, and certainly I hope jockeys are happy with how you are doing your business for them, because obviously this has been a very contentious issue, and the jockeys at the end of the day are elite athletes. They are part of a sport that they should be considered as elite athletes, and they should be treated as such. Paul, a question for you. Let's go back in time. You were in comms at the BHA. Right, Lord Allen has bottled it, right? He said, no, I'm not doing this. There's no hope. But they come to you, Paul, and say, Paul, will you take the position with the bar stewards as consultants?
I can't think of two least likely things happening.
Well,
I include myself in that fully.
No, you're spot on. I've said it before on podcasts, the BHA spoke fantastically well at the round table that was discussing with DCMS and key figures in Westminster and key racing figures also. They spoke fantastically well. And I read you.
Well, Hitler gave great speeches as well, though, didn't he? He was good on his feet.
Giving them credit here.
They have
Listen,
you.
They don't have me at all. I'm far from it. They speak so well around the table, agreeing with I think more or less everything I think about the game. But then when it comes to it publicly, Paul, as your article said in the Racing Post, I think earlier this week, that you are surprised that there is no noise from High Holborn in terms of, right, this is what we believe in, this is what we're doing. What would you be doing now, Paul Struthers, if you were at the head of the BHA, knowing some of the ideas that may be floating behind the scenes to help racing?
Look, I think first things first, and it's interesting because obviously the work you've done around affordability and then getting that meeting in London up and going and the people that came to that meeting. I think one of the things that I certainly always experienced when I was at the BHA, we've got to think that's a long time ago now. I left in 2011. And as much as they can frustrate me, and there'll always be some natural friction between us and the BHA because our members are regulated by them and getting banned, etc. But there's a lot of good people there, and there's a lot, and a lot of good people that are really, really passionate about the sport. And I think one of the issues that I've probably had over the years with the BHA since I've been in this role is, and it's probably one of the reasons why I was never massively suited to comms and PR and why I struggled with it a little bit, is that I'm very much of the camp that if you get something wrong or you do something wrong, you hold your hands up, you say you've got it wrong, you apologise, and you try not to let it happen again.
Yes.
And this isn't having a go just to BHA, because this is across sport. It's across sport, it's across politics, it's across everything. There is a fear of apologising, and there's a fear of holding hands up that I just don't think is the right approach. And don't get me wrong, if you're constantly holding your hands up and apologising for things, it kind of points to you being not very good. That frustrates. So one of the things I personally would do differently is you don't always have to kind of polish a turd, that expression of, and I don't think they do it all the time. And I think the comms team at BHA are very, very good. They've got a lot of really good people in there and people who are friends of mine, like Robin and stuff. So I make that point first. And I also therefore get that as a governing body, there's a kind of style and way you've got to present things, which does make it a bit more challenging, that they can't just come out tub thumping. I struggle a little bit with that idea, that particularly around this subject, Lee, around the idea that you can't have a go at another regulator, which I know is something that I know they're conscious of it. And the whole time I was there working in PR and comms, I was never responsible or involved in the public affairs side of things. So that is not something that is in my skill set or background, and therefore you leave it to people whose specialism that is. And if you've got your public affairs company that you're paying for and your public affairs staff saying, well, this is the best way to do it, then you listen to them. But ultimately, like any job and anyone who does anything, you're judged on results. I don't think we're talking rocket science. It's what's going on with affordability checks is potentially, I wouldn't quite go as far as saying it's fatal for the sport, but we're already seeing the damage from it. I have an issue with it just on a kind of civil liberties viewpoint. No one's affordability checking. I don't smoke, but if I did, no one's affordability checking me at fags when they're £15 a packet or whatever they are now, even more, or on booze or on anything else. And I just think it's what racing's done thus far obviously hasn't worked. And you were at that meeting, and you'd have, I don't know whether Martin was there and Brant and who else was in attendance, but I think
Brant and Greg Swift.
So it's not as the PJA. We're not one of the ultimately primary stakeholders that gets involved in that side of things, but you're certainly sensing a slight change in direction there, because the proposals on tax and stuff are really, really, really concerning. And then look, what I've been, it's a big role that they've got. I know and understand the frustration that the BHA can sometimes have when they're being criticised for things that kind of really aren't their fault. Because it's things like the fixture list, they'll get people criticise the BHA for it, but they really don't have much control over it.
So I would like to know, because I think punters would like to know, What do the BHA, what do they have control of currently? What could they change right now? What's within their power and their remit?
In terms of the fixture list, the only thing that's within their control are the BHA fixtures. So the BHA have their own fixtures, of roughly, I think, about 200 of them. So they are within their control. And then there's a lot that kind of is in their control because this new governance structure, so this came in a couple of years ago, that the BHA board is the ultimate decision-making body, and the commercial committee, which sits beneath it, is really only an advisory body. But equally, I've long held the view, because this is a problem this isn't a new problem, so it's obviously come into the fore of late because there was the Racing Post's reporting that Lord Allen has delayed his start. That was the first we knew about it. We've subsequently been updated on that subject and on some of the reasons why that's been delayed, but obviously we've been updated on that confidentiality, so I'm not going to breach that. But ultimately, as the Racing Post have reported, it's around potentially governance issues, and this governance problem's been going on forever and a day. We've had numerous restructures, and you get a bit cynical to all these restructures because we went from having the Jockey Club and the British Horse Racing Board, then the Jockey Club post Panorama really set up the Horse Racing Regulatory Authority at arm's length from the Jockey Club, so it was running racecourses through Jockey Club racecourses and regulation through the HRA. Then there was a merger of the BHB and the HRA, but it was more of a takeover than a merger. Then we've had the BHA and numerous different changes to the governance of the members' agreement, and now we've got this committee-based structure. But ultimately, it still doesn't. It's better than what it was before, but it still doesn't work. And ultimately, my view and the view of the PJA, and what doesn't necessarily mean everyone shares this, is that what you need, and it filled me with dread to some degree, but you need it, is a fully independent BHA board. You get rid of member nominated directors, in my view, have full independence, because independence doesn't need to mean that you're ignorant of the sport. You can have independent people who are still really passionate about the sport and know about it, and just free them up to make decisions that they feel best. But they will not have, I don't foresee, control of the fixture list, because post Office of Fair Trading, etc., those fixtures, as it currently stands, belong and are owned by the racecourses. And that lack of control is always going to cause some issues, because unless you can fully control the fixture list, and you can't, what some of the big changes that potentially need to be made at the moment can't.
Do you think racing could be in trouble following the media rights renewal in terms of courses? Are we predicting big course closures here after the sort of media rights deal renegotiated?
Yeah, again, I'm not, because the media rights are negotiated by ARC and Racecourse Media Group on behalf of their tracks. We're not at all close to it, or if it's to the point that horsemen and women don't even know what racecourses get paid for media rights.
Yeah.
Ultimate, and it remains, and it is. We shouldn't just be fixated on media rights, because racecourses have all different income streams that are off the back of racing. So it's not just media rights that we need to be focused on, but it's. I think it does continue and will continue to cause issues between horsemen and women and racecourses, and will stymie racing, because when there's no, for want of a better expression, collectively bargained agreement, and there's no commercial agreement between racecourses and thoroughbred group members and horsemen and women to say, well, this amount of income, whatever that figure might be, will flow back through to the participants, to owners, to trainers, to stable staff, to jockeys. And without that, there is a constant barrier to progress, because, and you don't like doing it, because you try and act, every stakeholder's got a different role and a different view of how they want to operate. And one of the we're just doing our 3-year strategy at the PJA at the moment, and you are trying to not just be parochial. and you are trying to do things for the good of the sport, because yes, our job is to represent jockeys and to support jockeys and to advocate for them. But a big part of our job is to ensure prosperous and sustainable sport for not just this current generation of jockeys, but for the jockeys that come in 5, 10, 20, hopefully, years. And the same for the rest of the sport. But if the funding is all just going to the racecourse, who then decides what they're going to give you? They're not forced to do anything, they decide. And there's some ways that the BHA can kind of try and change behaviours through their various funding mechanisms for fixtures. But yeah, it's a barrier. And ultimately, I think when you're looking particularly at this situation with Lord Allen, I kind of side with Ray from what you said on Nick Luck's podcast last week, that I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing this is being brought into the open, and I think it's good that I've not met Lord Allen, the PJA hasn't met Lord Allen. I think we might be the only body that's not met him, but I don't think that's his fault. That someone coming in and seeing that there are governance issues and wanting to change them, I think is great and really, really important. And it's boring because you'd much rather just be talking about the sport rather than the politics and the structure of the sport. But it's hugely important. I think this is a really key moment for the sport, because if you miss another opportunity to get the governance structure right, I'm not sure how many more opportunities we'll get.
You make some great points there, but the one part of the plan that I produced to the table, and of course DCMS, was the UNESCO heritage status. Surely that's an amazing idea, because what this does is protect racing long term from harm groups, antis trying to ban racing. If it's UNESCO heritage protected, and it would qualify under numerous things about the historical framework of the sport, from everything it offers to the British public, from the royals, etc., etc. For example, Saudi Arabian camel racing has UNESCO heritage protected status. I want the powers that be, Paul, to implement this as a starter for 10. This protects racing from ever being banned by complete lunatics.
I must admit, Lee, I'll be perfectly honest. When I saw that kind of idea in your proposal, personally, I was like, I really like that idea. I think it's a great idea. Now, I have zero idea how you would go about that process, but it also tallies in when you look at some of the strategy work that's been ongoing, that heritage is like there right at the heart of racing and of some of the strategy work that's been going on. So how you go about doing it, you're speaking to the wrong person with me, but I have to say, I thought it was just really, really interesting.
We have looked into it. It's not that difficult. You apply to UNESCO. If UNESCO agree, a member of parliament that has to agree with it, just one member of parliament has to present it to the government. If the government agree with it, that's it. You've done it.
There you go. Well, and you've met Greg. He's the public affairs guru. So it hopefully gave
Away you go, mate.
Gave you his number, and you and him can get cracking.
Absolutely. And there is a plan to save racing. Obviously, the document was presented. I'm not prepared to release all parts of it because just Twitter's a real nasty place, and etc., etc. And I don't want it derailed at this point. Right, on to some further questions now. This is the sort of fun part of the show that stops everyone slitting the wrists and getting depressed, which, of course, it happens to me on a regular basis.
Or increases the chances of it happening.
Yes, quite.
Depending on
Indeed. I've had some questions on the Kevin Blake thing. I'm not going to touch on that. Poor Sam the cat. It's one of them things. It is what it is. I feel sorry for Sam the cat, but it is what it is. Paul Timpkinson's been on. Who's bigger, Ed Chamberlain's head or the topper he was wearing, John?
I don't know. Has Ed Chamberlain got an outsized head? I
didn't know. No, his topper. It was about 6 foot.
A stovepipe hat, wasn't it? It was huge, yes.
Absolutely massive hat for Ed Chamberlain, of course. Coming on to one of John's topics, which was smoothies. Paul Struthers, are you into smoothies?
Not massively.
Now, Chris, are you massively into smooth?
Well, I like them, but they're fiercely expensive to buy,
Yeah,
aren't they? And I can't
Yeah.
be bothered to make them. So I've got one of those. But yeah, but you have to buy the raw materials, and they're not cheap either. I reckon you've got a few quid stashed away there, John.
Frozen pineapple and frozen kale and stuff like that.
Yes, yeah,
Well,
sort of Greek yogurt and all that sort of business. No,
oh no, you don't bother with that. You use tin coconut milk
yes.
and Kraken vanilla cherry rum.
Well, yeah, that's a different kind of smoothie, isn't it? Yeah, I see what you mean now. Yeah,
It's my kind of
yeah, I
smoothie.
like that.
Comment
very
on
much
today
so.
that the banana is not to be used in smoothies. I actually disagree with
Why
that.
not?
Right, someone said it's overpowering, but then surely that's if you don't like banana, you're not partial to a banana.
Yeah. Like strawberry and banana smoothies are very nice, aren't they?
Yeah. I've had them before.
What are we talking about
You're not going to say, well, I
smoothies
don't
for?
like banana, I'm putting cider.
Yeah. I mean, come on, we're wasting our lives here to
Yeah,
fucking
you
smoothies. It's a racing program, for
No,
Christ's sake. Gee.
No, this is important.
Oh,
It's positivity for
bollocks.
punters.
Yeah.
Punters need positivity. We don't negativity on this show. We've had an hour's worth from Paul Struthers. He's terrible. We need to dress this up as like the reboost, the re-energize section of the
Oh,
show.
I see. Right.
So
Okay.
yeah, of course.
Okay.
The way smoothies should work is, the vegetables that you can't
Yes.
stand but are really good for you, like
Yes.
kale and shit like that, right? You stick them on the
Yeah,
smoothie,
yeah.
stick some fruits in, and you can
Do you?
barely taste
Yeah.
the veggie shit.
Okay.
That's how you do it.
55
So
a
for you
day.
leaf dodgers, this is the way to get the
Oh.
leaves in your system.
Okay. Well, we've all learnt something there,
Yeah.
but don't you find it's a real fag to make though? Don't you? Don't you have to put ice in it and all that?
Yeah,
sort of
we have
business
ice in
and-
it. Yeah,
I've just put frozen fruit. Right.
too hard for you, Chris, to do.
Right.
Is,
Just I'll have to speak to the staff. I don't know what goes on below stairs. For God's sake. I know they steal my cigars. I'm 3 light of my cohibas. Must be the butler.
So John's into smoothies at the moment. I can recommend smoothies to anyone for sure. Aldi time. Everyone asks for our Aldi recommendations. I have 3 for you this week. 3.
Go on.
I've not been able to get them out.
Well, no.
Kevin Blake Tricast, that is. Get
Paul
in the right order,
Struthers
though.
that visits Waitrose every week, doesn't bother with the
Yeah,
riff-raff of
Ocado,
Aldi,
yeah.
all that
Fortnum and
rubbish.
Mason.
Like,
You'd be very wrong there. Aldi is our number one go.
Fortnum's.
so
Yeah,
listen
go
to
on.
this then, right? And I can testify this is mustard. Vive, VIVE, right? It's like Fanta Lemon and Fanta Orange Zero. It is absolutely carbon copy. It's just about half the price. Honestly, it's an absolute winner, right? This is a summer drink. Everyone likes your fizzies in the summer. Nice bit of ice in there. Or if you like your alcoholic drinks, Fanta Lemon and Fanta Orange Zero goes very well with mixers. Top tip, that is. Second one is, it's called Luxury Divine Biscuits. They are the exact replicas of Tim Tams.
What Tim Tams?
You know, the Aussie. Yeah,
Right.
they're like penguin biscuits, but better.
Oh, right. Okay. Never heard of them. Okay.
They're £1.80 a packet, and they are absolutely divine.
Right. Yeah.
And the last one is chicken soup and tomato soup. They're the only ones I've tried. Are exactly the same as Heinz at Aldi.
Yeah.
And about
price
4 times cheaper.
Okay. There you go.
There you go. That's my Aldi review. Paul Struthers, what show do you get this on?
None.
Yeah.
Probably several others, I would have thought, but not where.
Not a racing podcast.
No, quite.
They like us when we talk food for some reason. I don't know why.
We do. We should remind them again. Aldi school cake with the hundreds and thousands on. That's the.
Andy McGee says, I used to eat Ovaltine powder out of the tin as a kid. Any unusual things that you used to eat like that?
Hartley's jelly. You know the cubes you used to add just sort of hot water to and then let it go. I used to eat the jelly neat.
Your nan made the cake mix. I used to like eating the before it became cake.
Oh
yeah.
My God. Yeah, that's like that's unreal. Yeah.
Paul, any childhood memories for you on that in terms of
I was thinking of Instant Whip.
Oh yeah.
Which is giving away my age because Instant Whip and always with less milk than the packet said. God knows what was in Instant Whip or Angel Delight for that matter.
Angel Delight, Instant Whip.
Butterscotch Instant Whip.
The Angel Delight, though, Chris,
Yeah,
that was the biz, wasn't it?
That's the bollocks. Yeah. I had that actually a couple of weeks ago. Angel Delight is fantastic. All flavours are recommended. I don't think there's a bad one. I really don't.
John?
Can't think of anything unusual off the top of my head. I'm pretty straightforward.
Fucking pig's ears and intestines and
fucking
roadkill.
Sheep with the coat on a lot. Yeah, fucking.
You say it's had to find something unusual, isn't it?
John runs over a sheep. It's fucking not going back to the farmer.
No, it's going in the boot. Yeah,
absolutely.
Sometimes you have to chase them.
RD's been on, and he says, in other news, the bar steward's card game of choice: Go Fish, Uno, Rummy. What card game have you enjoyed playing in your past, Chris?
None of them. I can't stand card games.
Why?
I find photographs melancholy, and I find card and board games fucking so boring.
You
it's
absolute
just not
drip.
dreadful.
Dreadful.
Awful.
Unbelievable.
Fucking
You
awful card game, board game. Oh, Jesus, no thanks. Disgusting.
Paul Struthers, you can add some balance to this debate, surely.
We are big card players.
Yes. That's what I want to hear. That's what I want to hear.
Terrible.
And a great. It's brilliant. It's complicated because my wife's brother lives in France.
Right.
So we get the inside track on French games, and there's a French card game called Tarot. Tarot. It is brilliant.
I've never heard of that.
Highly recommend it if you like card games. You will love Tarot. But I think you might need 4 or 5 players. You can't just play with 2 of you.
I like the sound of this.
And Sky Joe's another good one.
What's that? Sky Joe?
Card.
Struthers is completely running rings around me on these card games. I were expecting more things like 3-card brag and things like that. I used to love Card on the Head. Have you ever played that?
Never heard of that. What's that?
What happens is you get 1 card dealt face down. So this is great train games or coach games if you sat on a table, like 4 of you.
If you're the driver, not so much.
Ace is high, 2 is low. You put the card on your head. No one knows what they've got, but you can see the other cards. And so then you start betting to like bluff the others out and start pointing and laughing at them if they've got a bad card. So it's a game of like complete bluff. And I've seen some amazing scenes with that game. Hundreds of pounds in the middle. 2 twos betting against each other, like laughing at each other. And obviously it's a split pot. Obviously you've got 2 twos, but it's just amazing value, that game. Massive gambling game, but Tarot, that's got me looking on Paul Struthers' recommendation. I love a good card game.
It's boring.
It's not.
He's just jollying you along. Paul hates cards. He's just trying to make
it's a test of character.
Honestly.
Right. Cards are a test of character. It's a test of character and brain power.
Fucking board games as well. Fucking hell. Simmering resentment at life. Yeah, that's me.
Disappointing from Lorne this today. He's got a disappointing show, flat as a fart. Ronnie Omelet's been on. Yeah. Have you ever fallen asleep at inopportune moments?
Yes, many times. Many times. I was prosecuting a criminal. Well, I was a case officer on a very large criminal trial once, and I actually fell asleep during the main witnesses, one of the key witnesses' sort of cross-examinations. And counsel said to me, what points have you taken up from that? I couldn't remember. I nodded off at the back of the court. It was just such a dull affair. So, yeah, that was embarrassing. Really poor.
I just drink gin and fall to sleep. So, inopportune moments, maybe. But, John, I mean, you fall asleep in show regular. I mean, like...
Dante mate in 1987 didn't go to bed the New Sidara night. Noel Merler's funeral on the morning of the Dante in Newmarket. Back up to York. Full day's racing, absolutely exhausted. Fell asleep on a primary school teacher who had gone home with.
Oh my God.
Very embarrassing. Yeah.
Paul Struthers, have you ever fallen asleep at an inopportune moment?
Today, I think.
Yes.
Yes, some of which I wouldn't talk about. I do remember, and this was unfortunate, a night out in London where me and my mate, we worked together at the BHB at the time, He fell asleep on the train back to Willesden and ended up in the sidings at Bedford. And on the same night, I fell asleep on the night bus back to Earlsfield and ended up in Selhurst.
Fucking hell.
And was woken up at Selhurst, which was at kind of 5 o'clock in the morning, and no taxis south of the river. That was a long and quite
dangerous walk
scary walk back to Earlsfield.
Yeah, they'll eat you, ain't they?
I don't know how I made it.
Wow. Good stories. We like them. Rory McAdory's been on. He says he's had an house clearance recently and he's fallen across a few old toys when he was a youngster. He had Airflix tanks and troop carriers, etc. as a big kid. I used to get glue on the windows on Airfix, so I never used to bother.
Yeah, tricky.
How do you not get glue on Airfix windows? I'd love to ask people on that. So he said, what was your favourite toys as kids? John, I know you mentioned Striker the other week, but you wanted one.
Yeah, I wanted one. I never actually managed to get one. That was an unfulfilled childhood ambition. I think it was about my 4th or 5th birthday. Jane got me a drum kit, which I held on to for about 25 minutes before she took it away, and I never saw it again.
Perfect.
Yeah. Chris?
Bionic Man, no offers, that is. The best toy ever. Do you remember the Bionic Man?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Sort of, with the arm was like a foreskin, wasn't it? You used to be able to roll it back, and it was like fucking...
Yeah, there was a spy hole in the back of his head, and you could look through the body.
And had an engine block that you should put in his hand and pump the back up, and it was like he was lifting an engine block with one hand. Brilliant toy, that. Phenomenal.
Mine was Evil Knievel.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
He started off on his ramp, and you wound it up with the handle on the side, and he set off at jet speed before falling over.
Before crashing into the skirting board.
It kind of replicated his real life stuff.
Yeah.
It was actually like him,
Evil
wasn't it?
Knievel for me. Yeah. Paul?
Test match.
Oh, what?
God,
what?
I loved Test match, although my granddad was a massive cheat. Because if you remember with Test match, so you had the little sixes in the corners dotted around. But basically, it was pretty hard as when you were the batsman and you were pulling the string. It was pretty hard to hit the ball anything other than straight. So I love Test match, and I'd play with my granddad, and I'd be putting the fielders pointlessly in proper fielding positions, because they had the little bucket at the bottom, didn't they, where they stand, and if the ball stayed in, you were caught out. And my granddad just made it such a miserable experience playing with him, because where the bowler had with the arm and it came down the ramp, he would put his 9 fielders right next to each other, just next to the bowler in an arm. And I'd be like, "Nor all out."
Yeah, you're right. My turn. Yeah,
and in tears. And he just would never. He would never do it any other way.
Brilliant.
But I absolutely loved Test match. It was great. I had Striker, by the way, John, and Striker was just massively overrated. You didn't miss out by not having it.
Well, the players got injured, didn't they? Because you bashed them on the head, and eventually they broke after about.
The leg broke. Yeah,
I agree. It did look good on the advertising, but Test match, what a game that was. And obviously, Paul's family member discovered how to destroy Paul. Like all good family members do, is when your kids destroy them when they're young.
Show no mercy.
Yeah, no mercy.
Show no mercy.
Yeah. Final question coming up to end the show. I know it's been a long one. Sorry about that, but it is what it is. We've got a great guest on, so what's not to like? Ice Cold Cube. The bar stewards are hitting the town, strutting their stuff. Where are they going? What are they drinking, eating? And who's the first to get Larry? Saying nothing. But John?
I'm sure Jack would be the first to get Larry.
He's bolshy, Jack.
Bolshy, so
yeah,
he's
good, he's good, he's funny, yeah.
Usual haunts, I would suggest, as for the night out.
Steak. Yeah,
definitely.
Steakhouse, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, it's just an interesting thing. Like on the first to get Larry, I think they're trying to get into our characters in terms of.
Yeah. Good luck with that project. We don't have any character, do we? That's the thing. That's ciphers.
Absolutely. Absolutely
one-dimensional.
terrible. Absolutely
Yeah.
terrible.
No personality, nothing.
No,
Dead.
dead
Yeah,
inside.
dead
It is what
inside.
it is. But
Yeah.
that's what the game gets you like, isn't it, folks?
Yes.
Paul Struthers. So, what is your ideal night out like with the lads? Let's so to speak.
Somewhere that's got somewhere
Yeah.
to sit down.
Yeah.
Now that I'm
That's why
50.
you come and sign the middle with us last summer. You love
Oh, it's brilliant.
Exactly.
Comfy armchair.
Armchair and food all afternoon.
Yeah, man.
Armchair and cup holder. That's all you need. No, I honestly don't really get. You go out probably now because like with the football dads. So I live near Andover. I live in a village outside Andover. We've been here about 19 years now. So it's village pub. We just go to the village pub. But once a year, the football dads at the end of the season all go out, or they might go out during the season. So we go out into Andover. And you always just end up getting carried away and end up going to the place with the sticky floor that do weird coloured shots, and you're getting a taxi home. And this is a late night for me now. Taxi home at 11:30.
Yeah.
It's really not a glamorous life.
It is, and we're all getting older at the end of the day. That's it. It's harder these days to sort of endure these moments, unlike our more sturdier younglings that may listen to this show. But of course, we cater for the grey pound. Right, just before we finish, just to promote the Ascot pod, we'll be back as normal on the sermon next Sunday. But the Ascot pods, we're doing 2 of them, 2 Ascot pods on Patreon if you want to subscribe. If not, it's available morning after. So you hope you enjoy those, and we hope to give you lots of winners for Royal Ascot on what is a quick turnaround from the Derby. Hope you enjoyed this one with the PJA head honcho, Paul Struthers, who has added lots of industry insight to this show, along with me, John and Chris, offering our usual nothing. That's all from us. Bye for now.